live right now.
For the audience, this is 4 raw pasture-raised eggs, probably a cup of goat's milk kefir, and some maple syrup.
There's really only one way to start it. Let's do it. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Also, people probably just heard us just gulping.
And whatever. Worth it.
Yeah, kefir is not my favorite though. I'm gonna be honest with the eggs. It's not my favorite. I'm a big fan of like milk and eggs. Not a big
So
fan
raw
of
milk tastes far better, but the texture of the kefir makes it more like a milkshake. And also, I digest kefir really well, and I still can't do straight raw milk. Like if I drink a cup of straight raw milk, I get like weird acid kind of.
Really?
Yeah. Like I'm like a very non-dairy digestive type person.
Hey,
right
there's
now, right now.
bioindividuality is a real thing. Like
Yeah.
I think a lot of people get dogmatic, but I'm not that way, dude. I absolutely love raw milk. You know, Harry.
I know.
Harry did a 10-day raw milk only fast.
Did a raw milk enema?
Dude, he literally said by the end he was shitting white.
Oh my God.
He called them ghost poops.
That's quite possibly the most hairy shit I've ever heard.
Yeah, straight up.
But yeah, it's like I told you guys at the dinner that you came to, I was vegan for many years in a row. So I think that there's also an aspect of like my gut biome being skewed towards what I was used to eating, just being like used to one way of eating, and then you swap over hardcore to just like straight raw dairy. And it's like, I think it's just going to take me a little bit of time to rework how my stomach is situated.
Your body's probably not going to react super well to just like straight out of the gate raw milk.
Just railing gallons of raw milk and trying to be a Meat Mafia member immediately.
You listen to one Meat Mafia pod, you're like, dude, I got it. Well, actually, that's a good place to start, man. Well, first off, Leo, thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time, brother. We'll dive into how we met and the cool things that you and Matt got going on and all that stuff, but you just brought it up. You were a vegan for how long?
Over 6 years.
Wow.
6.5 years. Yeah, I found out I got the idea for some quick backstory from being a big YouTube self-educator. So like a lot of what I've taught myself or learned about nutrition and health comes from YouTube. Obviously, you have to pick and choose who you're listening to. But there was a big like vegan wave craze around that time, I think. And there were some YouTubers up that were, they were super athletic and jacked and doing well on a vegan diet. And so I was like, I always thought veganism was just like weak, emaciated, like you're only doing it for the ethical or environmental aspect and sacrificing your health in the process. Kind of comes full circle at this point. I still have different beliefs on this topic from my own experience, but I found a couple YouTubers that were super athletic, super jacked. And I was like, okay, at 18, I wanted to be like jacked and athletic, but cancer runs in my family. And, there was no way for me to like confirm or determine that it was all diet related, but I knew that my grandparents didn't have great diets, or habits around health. And I was like, okay, maybe going vegan is a way for me to prevent the same thing happening to me. And if I learn about it, I can teach my parents. So that was my train of thought. Like it all came from like a good, positive place and never dogmatic. Always just like, let me try this and see if it works for me. A month in, I felt fine. So I was like, I'm just going to keep doing this because then I'm never going to get cancer.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's
that was my thought process at 19.
Bring the mic a little bit closer to you.
A little bit closer.
Yeah, right on. First off, that's a very thoughtful thought process at 19. Second off, I've sort of changed my perspective on, I've never been vegan. I've never been vegetarian. Like there's probably been 5-10 days of my entire life that I haven't eaten meat, maybe, like that I can remember. But I used to just think
extreme stomach flu. Those are the only times you weren't consuming steak.
Or a fast. Like whenever I've fasted, obviously I won't have meat. But I used to be like, just veganism is dumb. Like I kind of just wrote it off. What I was introduced to is the idea that at least vegans are being intentional in some way about what they're eating, which in my opinion is I don't know if it's better than just like mindlessly consuming like processed garbage that we're fed, but it's definitely a step in the right direction because it's intentional. You're at least taking a step. And I think it's interesting because Joe Rogan, who everybody has heard of, is an avid hunter now. Are you familiar with why he's a hunter?
Ethical reasons, I would assume.
So he was the way that I understand it is he was going to be
and
like
health,
vegetarian,
obviously, yeah.
or he wanted to get out of the industrial farming, like that. He just wanted to get away with it, or to do away with it. So he's either going to become like vegetarian or vegan or something, to just not be a part of it, or hunt. He obviously went hunting with Steve Rinella, and the rest is history. He's a massive hunter now. But I think that the intention to get away from the industrial farming complex is definitely a good intention, I think. Even if that wasn't necessarily your...
Yeah, I didn't start learning about that until way later on. It just started of health consciousness. I've always, not always, but in high school, my older brother was training to become a firefighter. He was an MMA fighter. He was like my role model and my hero. I'm super close with, or I love my brothers deeply. So like I modeled myself after them when I was a kid, as most younger siblings do. And he was pretty health conscious, and that led into me being just super conscious of my health and wanting to improve myself. And that was like my first step into the whole like self-improvement thing as a young man. So yeah, I think it came from this intention to just be better. Even if you're going to like fumble through shit and take the wrong action, like you said, it's better than just feeding whatever corporations are giving you and just continuing to feel like shit. I'm going to take some action, whether it's right or not. So
what compelled you to stop being a vegan, to eat meat again?
So honestly, it wasn't that deep of a thought process. I'm going to be honest with you. Like some might assume that if you're vegan for that long, you start to really deeply identify with that as part of your personality and like your character. But it just like wasn't. Like, yes, when I was vegan, I was actively like talking to people about the things I was learning and trying to like ping ideas off of people. My dad actually went vegan as well, just because he's just a cool guy. Like anything that I'm interested in, he's hyped to like listen and hear me talk, and he's like down to try it as well. And the whole thing about potentially being better for you and preventing cancer interested him as well. But I never was like, like I'm going to die on this hill. I'm still an open-minded person. Like I said, I'm not dogmatic about any of my beliefs. And so moving to Austin was obviously a major catalyst in that. Environment's huge, bro.
Yeah.
Like, so I'm from San Francisco. That might give a little bit of background. San Francisco and California is very like liberal, and I was surrounded by awesome vegan restaurants. I had access to like great vegan food, so the process wasn't difficult for me. And then also just the overall like air of like just like liberal kind of thinking, I guess, probably falls better in line with like veganism than like being in Texas. Like, I know you're like a Southern boy, right? Are you from Texas?
No, I'm from Atlanta.
You're from Atlanta,
more or less. I mean, Atlanta's, the way I describe it is, it kind of is just like a bigger Austin, a little bit less weird. But I actually want to get into your San Francisco background. Well, first, it's interesting because I appreciate when things are not dogmatic. Like, I think we have a tendency to be dogmatic, and not to kill that word, but it's really a troublesome way of thinking, in my opinion. And I've been dogmatic before, and it's gotten me nowhere. In fact, it's probably taken me back. And I think so many people, even with carnivore, like the exact opposite end of the spectrum. On the extremes is typically dogmatism, and on the extremes, there's very few answers typically. That being said, do you remember like the first bite of meat that you took for 6 years?
My ex that I was dating at the time made me salmon. I think it might have been eggs first, because eggs is just a real easy one. Yeah, I didn't go straight, just like give me raw meat. Yeah. It was like what seems the most palpable probably right now. And I was also conscious of the fact that my gut biome was probably going to react strangely to it at first. I didn't think it was just going to be like smooth sailing.
Yeah.
And it was not for the first week. But my ex at the time was like really like excited by the idea of me eating meat again, because she wasn't vegan. So she was like, wow, this is going to make our relationship easier.
Date nights are going to be lit.
She's half Hispanic, and she was like an incredible cook and wanted to be able to cook me like dishes that she grew up eating and stuff. And she actually was doing that just with whatever replacement stuff. So she was hyped about it and was like, I'll definitely make you salmon. I'll make it the best salmon you've ever had. And I was like, let's go. And it was great. Yeah, it tasted fine. I didn't feel too weird about it afterwards. It took a little bit of acclimation. I spent a little longer in the bathroom that first week after getting back into it. But
well, even like going carnivore, I've had experience. Like, I've done like the longest I've ever done like strict carnivore was like a week. I'm more animal based. Like, I eat a lot of fruit and animal products. That's pretty much all I eat. I've been on an absolute date tear recently, bro. Have you ever eaten dates?
Dude, dates is a staple of a vegan diet too. So like for the past 10 years, I've just been date maxing.
Dude, it's
For
absurd.
sure.
And my buddy Luke, if he listens to this, will like, I'm talking like probably 5 times in the last 2 weeks. I've crushed well over 2,000 calories of dates in a day. Like I'm not kidding. Like the 2-pound package from
Where
Whole
do dates
Foods.
come from? The Mediterranean, right? No idea.
They come from
dude.
Whole Foods, as far as I'm concerned.
Single-handedly fucking wiping out.
Who was I talking to recently? I was talking to somebody about that was vegan, and they remember. I think they ate like a steak or something, and they were just like, "Oh yeah, like this is what I've been missing." So my question now, obviously, you felt good on it. You did it for 6 years. Have you noticed a difference now, like looking back?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference, people ask me that a lot too because they're curious. I think the biggest difference that I noticed immediately was just improvement in my digestion. And I chalk that up to just spamming my stomach with fucking fiber when I was on a vegan diet. It was a constant battle to figure out how I could get enough calories and protein in. Not impossible by any means, without exceeding too much fiber though. Like some people on YouTube, the people that I were following were just slamming ungodly amounts of like beans and legumes and stuff and lentils, and those never sit well with me. Like I'm not someone that can digest legumes. And if that's you and you're trying to eat high protein on a vegan diet, you're stuck with now like fake meat replacements that are just made of like soy and seed oils or like soy. And it's like, great, those are great options to be stuck with. It's
Estrogenic.
yeah, not only was it probably not ideal for health, but it was just super boring. And so yeah, that was the biggest struggle. And now my digestion is really solid. Unless I go crazy with some just processed junk that's just like sugar, gluten, and dairy all mixed together, my digestion is perfect.
Yeah.
And most people are aware at this point that digestive health is a big factor in like your energy. And if you're bloated and backed up, you just feel lethargic and terrible. And it shows on your skin. It shows in all these different areas. So that's been the biggest one for me.
Was your skin clear and stuff on the vegan diet?
Pretty good. Really? Yeah. Pretty good.
I think there's a lot of times where people will, when you make a big change, like I think it can go bad at first, and then over time it'll even itself out. Like even like I'm sure you might have noticed some things when you actually went vegan. Did you notice anything actually? Now that I say that,
it's been so long ago, bro. It was so long ago. I just didn't.
6 years is a long time. Bro.
I didn't notice like anything catastrophic when I changed from going vegan or when I changed from getting off of a vegan diet. It's small incremental changes that I think pick up over time. I don't think it's like a cold turkey, like immediate change that happens for people. Because like I said, I think it takes a while for your body to reacclimate. And also there's this whole idea of like your body recycles its cells regularly. So like once you try something new, a new way of eating, could be a matter of your body like recycling cells over time, and now you're literally made up of different foods, which is super interesting to think about. But yeah, no, I felt solid. My workouts did not suffer. My energy didn't suffer. My digestion was a little bit worse on a vegan diet. My libido was great. I still had high test. All of the weird things that people mention, and no offense if this is part of your belief system, but all the things that I was hearing, like, oh, your fucking teeth will rot and fall out and like all this weird shit happens, like that just never happened to me. Like I've had like perfect health, hygiene, and like energy and hormone levels through that whole process. But I don't know if that's a matter of me just being also super anal about my nutrient intake and trying to do things properly and being very cautious of that. And I'm not someone who like drinks regularly or does drugs. So it's like
there's bio-individuality is a real thing. There's also like perhaps you're just like, not to sound like cliche, like just built different. Like so perhaps there's just like a level of resilience that you already have inherently. And also, like you said, you're taking care of the other things that are a part of a healthy life. So I think there's definitely merit to that. I don't have like a super strong belief like about diet on it, other than the fact like the main thing for me is I'll say this to anybody to their face. You should not be eating processed foods.
And
majority of the time.
And on that note, if I were to have to do vegan again, it would be incredibly hard for me knowing what I know now about the negative effects of things like seed oils and processed foods, because I was eating so much processed shit, dude. So much.
Well, think about like all the like tofu and all that stuff. It's
yeah, I was never a fan. It doesn't digest good. There's so many mixed opinions on the whole soy consumption thing. Like doctors in the plant-based space were saying, you know, soy is an estrogen regulator or modulator, some terminology like that, meaning it actually helps to level out the normal amounts of estrogen and testosterone in your body. I don't know, dude. I can't read studies. I'm not a doctor. I was just going off of my own anecdotal evidence and testing things on my own body, which is like probably the right way to go about it. Like you can find someone who you think is awesome and see the signals from someone, like he looks athletic, muscular, he's happy, he seems energetic, the way that he eats works good for him. I can test what he does. And you can look at someone else who looks like a zombie and it doesn't have this like vitality and ambition and vigor, and then just be like, I probably don't want to eat like that guy.
The physiognomy check. Have you heard of that? Dude,
yes,
it's undefeated.
I love that term. I just learned about that recently.
I don't know if it's undefeated, but it's damn close. A family friend of mine always used to say, before I even knew what that term was too, he's like, I just use my eyes. And he's a pretty healthy dude, but it's like, I just use my eyes. Like, is that person, do they exude vitality? Do they exude health? Do they have healthy skin? Are they muscular? Are they in shape? Do they get out of breath when they walk upstairs?
Yeah.
If not, maybe I should question, like, so actually, do you know who Jack Cruz is?
No.
Okay. So he's like he's on the forefront of like a lot of very esoteric health beliefs. He's a doctor, and he was a conventional doctor. Now he's basically like he's spearheading like we're light-based being.
Okay, maybe I do know him then.
Yeah, well,
that sounds like a familiar term or phrase.
Yeah, so I mean, I actually didn't know about him until recently, but he's like fat. Like he's like metabolically unhealthy and like actually like obese, like probably 50 plus pounds overweight. And there is an element of like I don't know, man. Like if you believe this shit and you actually like are spewing it, he's very intelligent. He has a very interesting podcast on Rick Rubin's podcast with Andrew Huberman, and they kind of go at it. He's also an asshole. Like he's just like a veritable asshole. So it's just interesting, like to use that as a like not a heuristic, but like a paradigm to look at different health things specifically, but also just like life ideology. Like, is somebody happy? Is somebody fulfilled?
It's like with my friends that are the most just like honest, authentic, energetic, masculine, kind of like bro friends that I have. And I try to keep a lot of those people like that in my life, rather than just have it be like a bunch of super intellectual, like deep thinkers, people who are just kind of like shoot from the hip and are very like honest guys, you know? My older brother is one of those people. Just a very honest, like individual. Those are the people who mention things like that the most to me, where they're like, why would you listen to what that guy has to say? Like, obviously I wouldn't listen to what he have to say. Like, do you see him? Like, he doesn't even take care of himself. And I'm sometimes caught up in like the little intellectual thing. What he says sounds so good. The argument is so convincing. And there's like, I don't give a fuck. Like, look at him. He doesn't have the life that I want. And it's a funny like line that I've been able to draw through a lot of people like that. And those people might just be closer to like their intuition and kind of like that source. Like, I can just feel an energy coming off of someone rather than get sold by like a smooth talker or someone who's like hyper intellectual, you know?
Yeah, there's like this dichotomy between like trying to rationalize everything, and like you said, it's kind of like an intuitive thing. If you're in touch with your intuition, like your brother, firefighter, MMA guy, like definitely in tune with his physical body.
Yes.
And there's also that way, like, so if he's spent his whole life being like in tune with his body and becoming more and more tune with it, training, I think it becomes more of what's the word? Something that he looks at other things through as well.
Yes, 100%.
Which makes sense. But if somebody spends their whole life being an intellectual, not really in their body, they're probably going to try to intellectualize things.
Yeah.
In that way. Yeah. I think there's a balance, obviously, like the kind of scholar athlete, the jacked philosopher type vibe. That's more what I strive to walk the line of. But you mentioned your brother is an MMA fighter. I think we were chopping it up about jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, stuff like that. Is that something you've gotten into at all?
You know, I've done it on and off. When I was younger, I the whole like getting into fitness thing was all just a confidence game and like a self-image thing of just being like, I've always been a tall, skinny, lanky dude. Like, and you know, I've never been just like severely targeted by bullying and stuff. But when you're a young man, like you want to feel capable, and then kids fight and all this stuff happens. And so, and I lived in some like relatively rough areas with my older brothers. They had it much worse than me. They're my stepbrothers, by the way. So they came into my life when I was like 7 years old. And from that point, I was just like attached to them kind of thing. But I really got into fighting just to feel a little bit more capable and confident. I never found like love for it. Like the people who I know that are like obsessed with jiu-jitsu and obsessed with MMA, like they love it deeply. It's not like they're like forcing it to happen. They would like do it all day if they could. Yeah. And my older brother is one of those type of people. Like he'll work 10 hours on 6 hours of sleep and then go train for 3 hours after that, because he's like, it's just what I love to do. Like I miss it so much. So
there's merit to that. I think I actually align with that more. I think I'm much more physically, like I consider myself to be very like attuned to my body, because I mean I played sports my whole life in college and all this stuff, and so I'm much more drawn to those types of things. It's actually something that I've been diving into in my own life recently. Like I think that's actually missing to a degree, and I think there are certain things that are like manifesting and actualizing in my life that are showing that. So it's something that I really want to get back into. I trained jiu-jitsu like religiously for about a year, and it was like I fucking loved it. Like the exact same way. I was like, I'll go 2 a day. I don't really care. Like
so my roommate is, yeah, he's obsessed with it.
Dude, it's it is addicting. And jiu-jitsu specifically, it's like it's such an odd mixture. It's like cerebral and extremely physically challenging. So it's like I heard one guy talk about it who's a black belt, and he was basically saying that like kids specifically, the cerebral kids are actually typically better at jiu-jitsu than the kids that are like super athletic, at least at first, because it's like chess.
It is like chess. Everyone that I know, that's not everybody, but it's like there's a really close correlation between my friends that are also obsessed with chess and jiu-jitsu. Like they love it. It's that same level of like strategy, basically. People who are like strategic minded love both of those things.
Yeah, it's like one thing that the more you know, what's that, like the Kruger-Dunning effect or something, where it's like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know or something. When you, at least for me, I'll speak personally, when I got into jiu-jitsu, I was like, holy shit. Like the amount of things that I don't know is like overwhelming. And then I learned more, and I'm like, it's even more than I didn't realize. Because there's dudes out here playing like 15 moves ahead. They're trying to set me up with like a certain attack that'll then set me up for a certain defense that they know I'm going to take. And then when I do that defense, they'll have this, and it's just absurd. I think it's pivotal for young people. But I actually want to go back to something you just said I didn't know. So do you have any like biological brothers?
I do. I have a younger brother, 4 years younger than me. We're full blood related. And then I have a baby sister, 10 years younger than me. Half blood. Some Harry Potter shit. She's my half sister on my mother's side. And then my dad remarried when I was like 6 or 7. He got with my stepmom, and she had children of her own. So that's how I ended up with step family as well.
What's it like? Because I only have I have an older brother and a younger sister as well. It's 6 years younger, which I actually kind of want to get into as well, because that's an interesting dynamic, having a lot younger of a sister. What's it like? You said your stepbros kind of came into your life. What was that like having, how many stepbrothers that are older?
2 older stepbrothers, yeah.
What was it like being a young guy having 2 older guys?
It was so good for me. Just because my dad's a great dude, but like having older brothers is just a completely different vibe. And my older brothers are incredible. First off, I think there's like this interesting thing that goes on in a family when you're the oldest brother. So I'm the oldest of my blood side. Then I have a stepbrother who's the oldest of his side. And coincidentally, both of us were the ones that ended up getting in the most trouble and going through the most wild shit. And also like kind of breaking off from the family and being kind of like on our own and separating ourselves sort of to a degree through different seasons of life. And but you know, he doesn't have any older siblings, so he had it the roughest. You know, he's kind of out there with no one to look out for him or protect him. Your parents are off doing their own thing, and you're just in the world in San Francisco in some pretty sketchy areas, going to some really rough high schools. So he's got some like crazy stories, and just had to toughen up and find older brothers in community through different stuff like friend groups. which didn't end up working out like the best for him. You know, he got in a lot of trouble with the law as a result of that. And I kind of was sort of always this like defiant, like anti-authority person too, just constantly getting in trouble. I ended up getting in like deep trouble with the law as well. In like my early teen years. But when my older brother stepped into my life, I now had people to protect me and people to advise me and people to tease me and bully me for things that I deserved to be teased and bullied for before other people who didn't love me started doing that. So they were there to be like, you know, if you feel weak and like shitty about yourself physically, then just come work out with me every day and we'll get you right. And if you're afraid of getting beaten up and jumped at school, why don't you come to my gym and train with me? And then my oldest brother, you know, he would drop me off at school in like these awesome cars. Like he had an NSX growing up. He had this like V12 Mercedes. He worked like with like cars a lot. Yeah. So he would always have these cool cars. And it was just like so comforting and like reassuring to just know that I had someone to watch out for me. Like an older brother to just be there if I needed him. I knew if I was ever in a sketchy area and I got stuck and I was getting eyeballed by a group or something, I could just text them or call them and be like, hey, I need you to like pick me up as soon as possible. And they would always be there. So that's like, when I have kids, I definitely want to have multiple so that they can watch out for each other. I think that's like incredibly important, especially with boys. Yeah.
It's interesting. So you're kind of like, it's like you're not a middle child, but in a way you are.
Yeah, I really am technically a middle child, but I've gone through the development of an oldest brother as well.
Which is interesting. That's a unique perspective because I'm a middle child, older brother, same type deal where like Matthew McConaughey has this saying about like kissing the fire and walking away, basically like touching an extreme and then being like, oh shit, that's the extreme. Let me work my way this way, which I think is valuable for everybody, but you're exactly right. Like I learned so much from him without ever having to do any of the things that he had to do to learn those things. So it's as an older sibling, I'm assuming because I'm not the oldest, but it's like a certain level of wisdom that comes with that. Yes. That's like hard earned. That I've always been told. It's referred to me as inexpensive versus expensive experience. Expensive experience is when you have to earn the experience through your actions. So for me, an expensive experience would be getting in trouble with the law personally. You're like, oh shit, I shouldn't do that.
Expensive.
Inexpensive. And that could, like literally financially expensive. Yep. But inexpensive would be, hey, me looking at my older brother saying, he did this, it resulted in X, which resulted in Y. I'm just not going to do X. And then that won't happen. So that's inexpensive. It's invaluable to be able to have an older brother or an older sibling to have that.
And I feel like that's a really interesting point to dive into further because I feel like as a man, there's a certain degree of just rite of passage of things you just have to go through. So being the youngest child, I feel like there's probably some sort of, what's the word for it? Not pathologies, but there's some sort of like potential negative result that comes from being that protected and coddled where like if you aren't given the opportunity to figure shit out on your own and get battle scars and like get injured, you won't internalize the experiences or the information in the same way. So I think being an older brother, I feel like I'm like the most privileged of the family then if you think a bit about it that way, because I got to accrue scars and go through wild shit and be put in environments that were traumatizing to a degree in like a way that turned me into the guy that I am. But then I also never felt alone in that process. Like I always felt like there was someone, if shit got really bad, I would be able to call somebody.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There's one thing my brother has like always told me, and it's so true. Like it's funny too, specifically on the podcast. Well, baseball was like the first thing. He always would tell me he's like my biggest fan. Like all the time, dude, I'm your biggest fan. I'm your biggest fan. And he would like, it was action. Like he would act that out in life. So I knew that. I believed that. And even with the podcast, like which is like my thing that I'm focusing on now, or jujitsu, honestly, he'll like check on it more than I will. He'll like tell me, you do that YouTube video did well. That podcast really. So it's just interesting to have that. And I feel so blessed for that, dude.
Yeah.
Because I know there's so many people that don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I had the same thing. My older brothers literally were my biggest like supporters. Like they would just be like, I don't know, just made me feel like the weird like neuroses that people go through. They would just try to answer those for me. They'd be like, "Nah, dude, like you're funny, like you're charismatic, you're good looking, like you're a steal. Any girl should want you.
Yeah.
You're super cool. You're smart enough to tackle this opportunity anytime that they could see me like wavering." Um, and that's something like that I've tried to carry into how I interact with my younger siblings as well. Like something I learned from them because you don't realize how important that is until it's gone, and then you're like, whoa, like it feels a lot different when someone's not giving you that like support on the back end.
Yeah, they're there to like, well, not there, but I feel like you can relate to this, but I feel blessed because there is that support, but there's also a level of checks and balances. It's like if your brother's real with you, it's like, hey man, what you're doing right now in X arena is actually not like up to that standard that that you should live up to, or that I believe you can live up to. So there's an interesting balance, but I'm curious because my sister is 10 years younger than my brother. Mm-hmm. I'm 6 years older than my sister. And first off, I just like adore my sister. I'm just like, I would fucking murder somebody for you. Like,
oh yeah,
like wouldn't even
without a
think,
doubt.
like, it's just one of these things that I suppose that it's like maybe a foreshadow of what it feels like to have a daughter in a way, because I'm just like protective over her in a weird way, not a weird way, in a I would argue a natural way. Have you had like a similar experience with your sister? Is it like entirely different?
Yeah, no, and it's funny that we have the exact same age gap dynamic then. Like you're in the position that my little brother is in with us too, and then the oldest brother is 10 years older than the baby sister. Funny enough, my step family is the exact same thing.
Oh wow.
It's 2 older brothers and a younger sister, 10 years younger than the oldest brother.
Wow.
Very weird. I don't know why that happens, but maybe that's some sort of a divine cosmic planning kind of thing that happens. But yeah, I would die for any of my siblings, and I would certainly kill for any of them as well. I think about that like that kind of hierarchy of siblings sometimes too, because like I know that if I were to ever say something like I would die for my older siblings, they would be pissed at me for it, because it's almost like there's the
like,
the
no, I'd die
hierarchy.
for
Yeah,
you.
like we'd all die for the youngest. The youngest one is the one that survives. We all protect this. It's like the men and the women and children off the Titanic first, and then the men stay back. It's like the same thing with the older sibling dynamic. But yeah, I got a lot of love for my baby sister, and sorry for the mic situation. She lives back in San Francisco with my mother, so I don't get to see her very often. My little brother lives back there as well, and so it's like the unfortunate reality of being far away is, and I'm big on like face-to-face human interaction. I think it's incredibly important to be able to like hug somebody, shake their hand, look them in the eyes in person versus just be doing phone stuff all the time and Zoom calls and Instagram meme sending. So like most of my little sister's life, I have been away from the family. I've been traveling, or I've been in other cities just building things for myself. So I haven't got to see her development as much as I wish I did, but it's a really, really deep, integral, important part of my master plan over the next few years for me to try and get back involved with my siblings as much as I can. And I think that there's the potential to become really, really close, just because I've started to realize that like through my own self-development journey of traveling and making money and working on my health and building this flourishing like community and social circle that I have here, that I'm just stocking up information and reference experiences that I can share with my younger siblings to help cut the learning curve in a lot of these areas. And then I'm willing to sacrifice time, energy, and money to make it even easier for them too. So, my little sister is going to be graduating high school relatively soon, and once you graduate high school, you're in the real world. And I think genuinely, I believe this. Like, there's no one in my family right now that's more capable of helping them at that point once they're like thrown out into the real world than me, and that's like a big plan of mine at the moment. But yeah, like I would do anything for them. I would give up everything that I have just to make sure that they're all good.
What was it like navigating separated parents?
So yeah, I wonder if my little brother remembers any of that, because he was just a little baby when our parents separated. It was tough. and I'm still kind of getting to know how it impacted me as a little kid. I feel like I don't know if I mentioned this at the dinner when we got really deep talking about like childhood and stuff and background, but some of my earliest memories, I feel like the memories when you're really little have to be either super positive or super negative to stick with you. Like you remember like the highlights of things almost. They just like stick into your brain and pop into your consciousness. And a lot of my highlight moments are super chaotic and dark and negative, and they have to do with my parents just being in like extreme conflict, then separating, then both of them wiling out individually on their own, trying to come to terms with their addictions and like drug and alcohol use and going through rehab and things like that. And then me just being torn from my mom every weekend, like physically and emotionally torn from her to go spend time with my dad. Like I just had the worst image of him for whatever reason. Took maybe 2 or 3 hours to warm up and then have a great time with him. But every time it felt like I was just being like ripped from my mother. And I remember just like all of those times. It was just very traumatizing for sure.
That's interesting because, I mean, well, first off, I think it's so important to like do that reflection and be able to, what's that saying? If you don't make the unconscious conscious, you'll live your whole life calling it fate or something like along those lines. Or it'll direct your life and you'll call it fate. It's so interesting the long-term effects of things like that happen as a young kid. And both my parents are like they're still married, so I don't have that specific experience. I don't relate to that, so I'm always interested to hear people's experience with that. And you just mentioned something, and you don't literally go into it as much or as little as you want.
I like talking about these things. It's healthy, I think.
Yeah, I agree entirely. So I appreciate your candor and your vulnerability. But the drug and alcohol or drug use and stuff like that, is that something you mentioned earlier that you've never been a person to like really, or you're not a person to
Well, it's not that I've never been, but I don't consider myself like a consistent, like habitual user. And I'm also like pretty wary of getting into that place these days. But yeah, like the drug and alcohol exposure as a young kid was pretty intense for me, and definitely gave me some probably pretty unique perspectives as an adult when it comes to that kind of stuff, for sure.
One of the things that so we can go ahead and get into it actually, the Jeffersonian dinners that you and Matt, well, firstly, like, so I typically do, like Matt, for example, like when I'm having a guest on the podcast, I'll usually like follow them for a little bit, or like I know somebody who knows them and ease it out a little. For some reason, I came across Matt's page because my buddy Luke told me about him. I'm like, okay, this guy seems interesting. I want to talk to him. Like, just kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
We had a phenomenal conversation. He invites me to y'all's Jeffersonian dinners, which are such a cool idea. And I had a phenomenal time at that dinner. But the point that I'm getting to is, you even mentioned it, there's no alcohol there.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody else at the dinner remarked how refreshing it was to come to like an event that's social and have Aquapana water or RO water. It's not wine, beer, liquor, right? Like, it was just a earnest conversation with none of that stuff. Is that something that y'all were really intentional about creating?
It's just congruent with who me and Matt are. Matt does not drink. Like, he's been sober for many years. And you guys probably talked about his own experience with that and stuff, and he's pretty open about that. And I don't drink regularly. I'll maybe drink once a month just for a special occasion, like a date or a celebration or something, but it's not something that I do habitually. And I don't have like an intense anti-alcohol thing. But, the first couple dinners that we hosted in that same format and style, we were extremely intentional about the guests, extremely intentional about the topics of conversation, and we became more and more intentional about the structure and how the energy flows through the night. So, like, I really love this in-person aspect. It's something that, like, I've just found a lot of passion in. I love talking about it and working it out and teaching it to other people and improving upon it and trying to make this experience of bringing a group of men together, a group of people together, but for what we're doing, a group of men together for the purpose of getting to know each other and learn from each other as like energetically strategic as possible. So when you bring alcohol into the mix, everybody reacts to alcohol differently. I'm the type of person who, depending on the alcohol, I'll have fun for like 30 minutes or an hour. And then after that, it's just an energy crash. So I have to be super turned on when I'm running the dinners to help moderate and to just keep the energy high, like lead by example. And I love them too. I fucking love hosting and running and being a part of the dinners. So just anything that's going to get in the way of that, I don't want, that's the same reason why we are catered by Zeke and we bring healthy food and snacks and desserts, and we don't like, gut bomb you with a bunch of like gnarly food and some heavy sugary dessert, because we want to keep the energy high and we want people to have clear minds so that they can present themselves in their most like authentic self, and they're not like, they don't leave thinking like, fuck man, I didn't like formulate my thought very well. I'm kind of bummed about that. We try and set up the environment just to facilitate like the best conversation we possibly can. And personally, I think alcohol can just get in the way of that. I don't want people to get loose, weird, and then start getting offended easier, start getting aggressive. Just everyone reacts to alcohol differently.
Totally true.
We brought alcohol the first couple of dinners and just only a few people drank, and then like, this is just like not even worth it. Let's just not do it anymore.
And it's also, I'd be curious to hear, has anybody complained about there not being alcohol? I feel like
Absolutely
most people are like,
not.
oh, this is actually refreshing.
Yeah, absolutely not.
It's
Not
almost
at all.
unequivocally the other way.
And then I've had like, at some dinners when this gets brought up, sometimes I'll be like, raise your hand if you just don't drink. And it's like 70-80% of the group almost every time, which it's just a coincidence, I think. But again, like we're gathering a group of guys semi-consciously to be a certain type, but also me and Matt with our invitations just let it be sort of an intuitive thing. Like, do I like this guy? Does his energy seem like it's cohesive and congruent with the group that we're trying to build here? And then it just, it turns out a lot of those guys don't drink. So,
well, you said it's a coincidence, and I think it might not be, because especially if you're trying to be intentional about who you're bringing, which is very important, especially for the environment you're trying to cultivate. Perhaps it's not a coincidence that most of the people that y'all end up inviting are not the type of people. And I'm not, dude, like, everybody's got different seasons of life. I'm not like a staunchly against alcohol, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think it can actually be a tool. I use it much to the way that you do it, in terms of celebratory. I'm not a habitual drinker. I never have been. That being said, I think there is a level of, not protection, but yeah, the way you said it, most people don't act as authentically as they otherwise would.
Yeah.
When they have alcohol involved.
Or are you a Rich Roll fan? You like his pod?
I'm familiar with him.
I've listened to a good handful of his podcasts, and he has got a really interesting stance on alcohol, because he's like an alcoholic, recovering alcoholic or whatever. And he talks about like this idea of he's finally felt like himself when he started drinking, and that was like what got that addiction deeply ingrained into him. And I also have felt a similar way drinking in the past. Like, a lot of us start drinking when we're young and we're anxious teenagers, and we're doing it at parties, and then we like feel like a superhero, and then we're like, well, this is the key. This is the magic elixir to me being like the confident guy that I want to be. Courage juice or whatever they call it.
Liquid courage.
Yeah, and I don't want to build that into the like the fabric of what we're doing with Reveal. I'd rather people be uncomfortable and have to face their fear of speaking and like find confidence in themselves without the alcohol, because then they're going to leave riding a high and feeling incredible, because I've done that as well. So
one thing, so me and Matt spoke about this as well. Have you heard of the word Shakti Pot?
No.
So I've brought this up so many times in the last however many episodes, but whatever. It's a Hindu term, I believe, and it basically refers to the physical exchange of energy. And you've mentioned several times like your love of in-person things, like being able to hug, talk, even this. Like I've done many virtual podcasts, and it is what it is. Like I think it's still valuable, but there's an element that's missing. But Shaktipat basically refers to the exchange of energy physically. And the example I always give is, you can listen to music on Spotify, right? You can watch a music video on YouTube. So why would anybody spend money and time and energy to go to a concert? because there's a physical exchange of energy. Something I don't know what the hell it is. I just know something happens in person. So I felt like mentioning that because I think that's what y'all are doing at these dinners is like so unique, bro. Like it really is it's an extremely unique and cool thing that's happening that is, I feel like if more of those happened, the world would be like, the more of those that happen is almost like, it's almost like correlated to how much better I think the world could be. Like if more people were meeting, specifically like our sphere, like young men were meeting and talking about real things and learning about each other without the influence of drugs, alcohol, or women, I think that we could be going some pretty cool places.
2 things that I want to say on that. First off, thank you for the compliment. I appreciate it. We build it for people just like you. So like getting feedback from you after your dinner was super helpful. And like your input during the dinner was amazing as well. I think everyone should be trying to do stuff like this. Just organizing regular times for people to bring together a group of people and just hang out and spend time together, even if it's not intense like Jeffersonian conversation like we do. It could just be family dinners or like, like what Matt does on Saturday mornings, a workout followed by a meal. Just try to build in ways that feel sustainable and congruent with who you are, but make it a group in-person event. And like through the community that I'm hosting or that I run with Reveal, I want every member, if they want to do this on their own, to also be doing it on their own. Like I don't gatekeep any of the info that we have or like the feedback that we've gotten. I'm like, if you want me to teach you how to do this, I'll teach you how to do it as well, because it's super important and I love it. And then another thing on the shock the pot idea, there's like this aspect of like when you listen to a heavily produced song on Spotify versus the raw vocals in person, it's more relatable to a degree. Like you can see this person sweating and shaking and throwing their energy into the song, and you're like, wow, like I get it now. Like this is the emotion that's trying to be conveyed with this music. And then also there is there's like this idea of like you're not hiding from anything when you're seeing this person. Like it's just the raw truth, and then I can feel the real skill and talent and difficulty. Like when you see someone on stage, you're like, I could not do that, or I could do that. It's like you relate to them in a different way. And it's the same thing with like Zoom calls. It's like I'm like hiding who I am in my posture. I have a fucking blurred background that's not actually where I live. It's just like this like I'm basically just living in the metaverse like a little avatar, and I'm not showing you who I actually am. But then when I meet someone like you in person, everything from like the physiognomy to the way that your vocal tonality and how you speak to the group and the eye contact you provide for the whole group and the way that you stand, everything makes up this character of who you are. And communication is like a very small percentage, just words that you choose. So especially if you're just listening to like an audio podcast or something, you're only going to get to know me as a person through my voice and the words that I choose. You can't see my posture. You can't see how my body looks, how my skin looks, the clothing that I choose to wear. All of these things make up who I am. So I think the more that you can spend time meeting people and nurturing relationships in person, the quicker you can get to know who someone really is. And then you can find out whether that person is like in alignment with you and stuff. And also, like, dude, I wish I could hug my little sister and just see how she is in person too. Yeah. I'm sure you can read a lot about how someone's feeling and doing based on just stuff like that rather than a phone call, you know?
Yeah, there's so much to be said about like FaceTiming. It's like we try to do, or not we try, like we're utilizing tools in a way. Mm-hmm. But I think I want to use them as means, not the end, but means to the end. Same thing with social media. Like I've entirely flipped my paradigm for that and using it to like ultimately meet people. Mm-hmm. Like Matt is a great example, which led me to meeting you and so many other examples. But the thing about communication and like the physical aspect of it, I think that there's like some statistic, not that it needs to be like numbered, but I think they like the number that I remember hearing like my communications classes in college is like 7% of what the message that is delivered to us is the actual words that we speak.
Yeah.
The rest of it's tonality, physical presence, posture, all these things. And I sold solar in Florida for a little bit, and I actually one of my friends now, which is so cool. Like if I took nothing from selling solar, other than the fact that I got to become friends with this guy, then it would be a success. I had him on the pod. Like I literally knocked on his door, the coolest dude ever.
Damn, you met him through a door knock.
Bro, I met him
That's
through.
epic. I thought you were gonna say he was your coworker or something.
I met him through a freaking Ring conversation, bro. He wasn't even. He's like, "Yo, can you come back in like 2 days? Like we'll talk." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." I literally almost didn't even go back because I was like, he probably doesn't want it. Whatever. Long story short, I go back. We talk for 45 minutes. I go in his house. I see his gym. I meet his wife. I meet his young son, and I was like, "Holy shit! Like this is so cool." But he brought it up. Because I'm like an in shape guy. I'm tall. I have like a physical presence. He's like, dude, if full candor, I would probably not be here talking to you. We would not have a relationship if you were fat, if you were unkept, if you didn't speak well, if you weren't articulate, if you didn't present yourself in a specific way. And what we got to talking about is the idea of like the fallacy of being non-judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's obviously a limit to it. There needs to be a balance, but the idea that we don't judge or that we shouldn't judge, I believe to be incredibly dangerous because that's how we've survived as humans. Like if you're outside of my tribe and you come into my tribe, I'm immediately, okay, is this guy a threat? How do I know that? The words he's saying, what he's wearing, does he have weapons on him? What's his posture like? All these things are inputs. They're things that I'm taking in. And the more removed we get from the in-person interactions, the less of those inputs we have. So it's like it's like more relationships that are less deep, that are more surface level. So it's like, I don't know. Does that make any sense?
100%.
It's not as fulfilling.
I agree with you. And I think that like in-person interaction could also be looked at as a tool for the guys that have gotten deep into the tech automation space of where like, I just don't have time to get coffee with this guy. Like I have too many other sales calls. I have too many other, employee like interviews to run. And it's like, dude, I think your efficiency in finding out who this person is would skyrocket if you prioritize seeing people in person. That's just how I feel about it. And I feel like that kind of like, yeah, that's just along the same topic of why me and Matt run Reveal and why we're passionate about it. Is like part of the reason why we do it is because the world as a whole is shifting online like fast. Getting to watch how my younger siblings interact with their friends, like on schooling online and all the wild stuff. We could get into like the wild stuff that they have to deal with as a result of, doing online school in San Francisco and stuff. And how that affects like your mental health and your development. But our little piece of trying to combat that and bring it back to like that traditional sitting around a campfire, sitting around a round table and discussing things in person is Reveal. That's our contribution to things. And I like talking about that. I like telling people that that's like one of the big reasons why we do what we do, because that resonates with a lot of people. And people are like hungry for it,
And they might not even know it.
Dude, I'm blown away by how much positive feedback we've gotten. And that's why we doubled, tripled down on things and started, really just blasting, like doing it as much as possible is because people are coming up like, man, I would pay large sums of money for this. I will devote time and energy to helping you build this. Whatever you need, I'll be a part of it. And these are people who are far more successful than me by almost every measure. But they're like, I love what you do and it's important. I'm like, how do these guys not already have this on their own?
Yeah.
And then it just started to become more apparent to me that like everything is pushing you in the direction of being online, atomized and separated from other people. And so having our mission be just to bring people together and stay connected is like more important now than it's ever been. It's just going to keep being more and more valuable.
100%. And I think it's going to keep, I think that the universe corrects itself. Like, I think that there already is in at least in my circle, maybe it's a consequence of like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Like maybe it's the fact that I'm in certain circles where that's becoming more of the priority and then it becomes more of the priority in that circle, et cetera. But I think there is going to be this move, and there already is the move of like, we've kind of dipped our toe in the water with this like virtual life. And it's like more people are depressed, more people are suicidal, more people are anxious, all the shitty things going on. It's like, maybe we should try to like take a step back and then redirect. But one of the things, like one of the staples really, so for those that are listening that don't understand what a Jeffersonian dinner is, which I didn't, basically there's like, it's moderated discussion and you guys ask a question. Like you have a question for the night.
Yeah, the idea and where the name comes from is Thomas Jefferson used to host. He ran a private group called the Leather Apron Club, where
That's
he would
such a base name.
yeah, it sounds very like intimidating and like epic, but you know, Thomas Jefferson was a massive networker. Like, if you like read about him, you learn that he's just an incredible people person and was really good at just like manipulating the social sphere to get things done and bring people together and make connections. And I think that's really interesting. And so the idea of the Jeffersonian dinner comes from these dinners that he used to host for the Leather Apron Club, where it would be a group of, I don't know exactly how many men. Ours are like anywhere between 8 and 12 guys, and I think that's the best number. Probably something similar for him, where he would bring together important political figures, scientists, tastemakers, people that were just like kind of like on the cutting edge of things, I guess, or whatever, to solve problems and just to debate and try and, you know, come together and get things done. And the idea is like one person speaks at a time. So everybody is focused on the current speaker. And then if someone else wants to jump in and rebuttal it or argue the point or agree with it, you give the person who's speaking time to finish their thought, rather than the typical dinner party is like, maybe you come with your friends or your spouse and you're kind of talking to them. A lot of the time it's like a little bit awkward and separated. And maybe you're the person who has the confidence to start speaking to someone across the table or at the other end of the table, but typically it's like little group dynamics going on. And that makes for a much less engaging and memorable experience. And ours are very conversation based. So we're like, this is the structure that we have to run for sure.
The structure is noticeable, and I think it's efficacious. It really works. And even I remember this vividly for some reason. Like, you went and turned off the lights, and I like took note of that. I was like, like this is an intimate experience. There's candles, and it's like, it's cool though, because like what I imagine in like times past, or me and Matt spoke about this too, how the synchronicities between our ideologies and the words that he used, connect and facilitate. Those are two words that have guided me in many ways, even subconsciously in my life. If it were to be something that I do, I just have this vision of like a candle lit, maybe a fire, and then some cigars smoked, and just these conversations that literally have shaped the world that we live in.
Yeah.
It all have happened in this way.
That started as our vision too. We were just like, how do we want this to feel when people come? How do we make this an experience that is extremely memorable? I don't want this to be the same environment. I don't want this to be the same structure, style. I want everything to feel unique and purposeful and like thoughtful. And our first vision was like, dude, if we could get like a private room in like a high-end restaurant or at the top of like a high-rise here in Austin, because I work in real estate, I was like, if I could land that, a cigar room with like a poker table where people have like a whiskey and a cigar, it'd be like a very Mad Men-esque, smoky kind of like speakeasy kind of vibe. And we're like, that would be cool, but is that congruent with who we are and what we want to achieve here? And it's like, nah, not really, to be honest. We don't need cigars and whiskey to have the kind of conversations that we want to have and to attract the kind of guys that we want to attract. So, but yeah, that idea of being extremely intentional with environment and aesthetic is really big. I've read a lot of books on event hosting and stuff. And this one book that I really love, I can't exactly remember the name, but she just goes into extreme depth in one chapter about how environment changes the energy of the event itself. So like entering this other realm that like makes you feel a certain way. If you're in a very dark room that's candle lit, a small group dynamic, and it's quiet, and we like play, you know, specific music in the background, it taps you into a certain state of thinking almost. Like, I don't know, you could sit at a big like wooden slab table with like an archaic looking candle and play like fucking Game of Thrones music or something if you want to like talk war and think in that headspace. Or if you're trying to be, you know, I wouldn't host the same style of dinner for women, and I want to start doing these for girls as well, but it's like I don't feel as capable of like curating the environment in the right way. So yeah, just intentionality to all the little details is big for us, and we want to keep getting better and better at that.
Yeah, the aesthetic, I tweeted this recently. The aesthetic of your life is inextricably linked to your philosophy. It's a physical manifestation of what you believe.
Yep.
And I think that it can go back and forth. It's one informs the other. It's like, okay, if I'm in an environment that's like very buttoned up, very like kind of like suit and tie, Mad Men type stuff, I'm going to be in a completely different headspace than if I was like on a beach, a table on the beach with like a loose flowy shirt and like different music playing. You know what I'm saying? Like we respond to our environments, and that's just how it goes. You guys asked these questions. The question for the dinner that I went to was, what's one belief that you hold that your peers, contemporaries, and friends almost certainly disagree with? What are some other questions that y'all have asked?
So we started out, I love that question, by the way. It's from David Data, if anyone wants to look that one up. And I got that one from Tim Ferriss. Originally, we started the dinners with this idea of theming each of them to a specific topic of discussion, letting people know ahead of time. And we've since shifted to having that be more of a mystery, and then sending the question in a group text the day of, so that people don't have too much time to ruminate on it. So it feels like their answer is authentic and they're not like Google researching a way to answer this question, but they have enough time to formulate their thoughts or start to get some ideas flowing. So like the first couple of dinners we had, the first dinner we ever hosted was called the 100-year dinner. And the idea was we would have people show up, and our question was, where do you see the world 100 years from now, and what impact on it do you want to have, or what role will you play in where it is 100 years from today? So like there's people talking to us about the future of things like Web3 and cryptocurrency. People were talking about art and expression changing over the years. That was a really, really interesting dinner. Another one that we asked, another topic was balance. So we brought a lot of entrepreneurs that we know that are super hardworking guys that have achieved a lot. And we wanted to ask them, like, how do you view the idea of balance in your life? Like, how do you balance your work with your social life? How do you maintain balance internally when it comes to pushing towards like that fire, like you said, getting closer to your edge, and then not burning yourself to a crisp and harming yourself in the process? That was another really good dinner. And then another question that I love that I think other people would probably like benefit from hearing, another one that I grabbed from David Data, is, what do you need to do or become in order to die complete? And I mean, it's worth noting that our dinners are all guys, and that's who we cater to. So a lot of the questions that I ask are pretty intensely skewed towards like the masculine. And that question is basically at the root of the masculine essence, is like, what do you need to achieve, or who do you need to be in order to die feeling complete? I love that question.
That's a extremely, the answer to that question would be insightful. Like, and one of the things that I found so interesting, even about the question you asked, and I love that y'all are intentional about the day. I think that's perfect. I didn't know that prior to that, you just mentioning it. I remember driving, it's like a 30-something minute drive on the way there, and I was thinking about it since you sent the text out in the morning, and I was listening to some instrumental, like just vibey music, just like trying to think about what my answer was. Mm-hmm. And I even mentioned at the dinner, like the process of answering a question like that forces you to like dissect what you believe.
100%.
Which is not something that many people spend a whole lot of time really doing nowadays.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting to even think about when I say it out loud. Like, we don't spend a lot of time thinking about what we believe, when what we believe is literally how we act, and how we act is how our lives play out. So it's such a helpful practice. Is that something that you did before the dinners? Like, was that something that you and Matt did, like just y'all two, or did it kind of come about as a result of the dinner?
Yeah, so I'm big on journaling. I know that you love to write, and I think writing is really important. I've been a big like reflector for a long time. It's gotten me through a lot of tough times and helped me find the answers to things. And then reading into people like David Data, like I mentioned, he talks about, stillness and meditation being the way that you get in touch with your intuition. So combining those two things, and then, prompting yourself with one of those questions, and then sitting in stillness, like complete stillness, meditating on it, can solve pretty much all your problems in reality. Like I feel like you have all the answers, and even if you don't, you'll come to like the closest thing that you believe to be the truth or the answer, and then you just test it, and that's how you learn and grow. Matt's incredible at this, and we hold each other to really high standards. So anytime I would come across, actually, it's worth mentioning that when me and Matt, my partner and my best friend, first met, we went out to dinner together at the Well here in Austin, and we both came, and it was just like this hilarious back and forth of us both asking questions and then being like, fuck, that's so good. That's such a good question,
It's a
dude.
great
And
question. I'll raise you one.
we just bonded over this thing that we both really love, questions. And yeah, we both are really big on mentorship, and mentorship is really all about, you know, spending time with someone whose ideas you want to internalize or get to know better, and then being able to ask those people the right questions and learn how to listen is super key. So, I was always just like, man, what questions could I keep in my arsenal that if I met someone who I really respect, it's not only going to blow them away by, by how like thoughtful the question is and get them to think and really be excited about answering it, but also it's going to be super high yield for me. Like I'm going to learn so much about this person and gain so much good insight from asking them. And so, yeah, like me and Matt just had a bunch of these questions that were like, these are like our go-tos and like we love them and they work really good. And Matt runs his own successful podcast, and he's compiled a bunch of great questions through that. And we used those to jumpstart our dinners and as the backbone of the conversation for our dinner. So we just cherry picked our favorite ones and thought like, okay, which ones do people love the most and which one do we get the most out of? And we started asking the group, and they're like, damn, this kicks ass. And then you see it working in a group dynamic. And then like one person answers this in this really thoughtful way, and then another person does the same, and then their ideas might clash or meld very well. And then we all get to learn by listening to this discourse between these two people. And it's just like, it's incredible, dude. So,
yeah, the questions that we ask of other people and of ourselves are so important. I think that actually in many ways dictate like our life, because like the questions that we ask are what we focus on really, because like in the end, in my opinion, like life is very much so about finding the answers to those questions, whatever they are. So maybe for some people it's like, can I do X? So then their life will be figuring out if they can do X. Yep. Can I make X amount of money? Okay, their life will be answering that question. So I think it's interesting to take a step back and actually think about the art of asking questions, the art of conversation in general. It's like a lost art, because a lot of people, I don't think, they ask the questions that they were told to ask. And then it's just like that layer. Like there's only that, it's like a 10-layer cake, but we're only like tapping into the first layer. How do you think that we get from that first layer of questioning to the next and the next, and then ultimately to like the deeper, most pervasive questions of life?
Read more, listen to great podcasts, and pay attention to the questions that the most successful people that you follow ask. So like I love David Data. I love Tim Ferriss. He's another incredible question formulator. I know that guy spends lots of thoughtful time just formulating and reformulating the words that he uses when he talks to his podcast guests. It's just like, just look at the questions that people ask. A lot of the times these like major popular podcasts are good because the podcast host is great at asking questions and then great at then listening to the answer and asking more prodding questions to get even deeper into things. Joe Rogan's also super good at this. Very intuitive, chill dude, very thoughtful, but like a lot of these guys are just naturally very inquisitive, and then like no surprise that they're also super successful because they gather all this really awesome information and insights and like behind the shadows kind of pull the curtain back information from like hyper successful people, and then they just take action on it. That's like the combination. It's just like ask great questions, learn the secrets, now take action and test it out. And that process right there will impress all the successful people around you too. They're gonna be like, this person is a fucking badass. Like they know how to ask questions, they know how to take action. And I think honestly, like, dude, if I attribute any of the success that I've had with like bumping shoulders with cool people, having incredible experiences, being able to travel and work alongside like some really successful people, like far out of my league, is just those two things probably. Like asking questions, being inquisitive and interested in people's perspectives and ideas and beliefs, and then taking action on the tips and tricks and the frameworks that they use and implementing it in my own life and seeing how it works.
It's interesting to think about the fact that like many of the most successful people, at least in my opinion, are those people that ask more questions than they probably give answers to. which is diving into that is probably there's a lot of wisdom to be learned from diving into that. But you actually mentioned something which is interesting, because I was going to bring this up directly after you answered it, but you already brought it up, the taking action part. So I think it's, for me, I'll speak out of personal experience. I'm very much interoceptive. Like I think, I reflect. I would say that I have a tendency, I lean towards overthinking, towards analyzing, towards thought. So I've found that which in my opinion leads to neuroticism, which in baseball, which is, we all have our own experiences. My most formidable experience as like in terms of long time horizon was baseball in my life thus far. So I upon reflecting, I realized, oh wow, I kind of became neurotic because of that in baseball. So when I'm at my best, I'm actually biased towards action, because I already have this basis of like I'm gonna think, I'm gonna reflect, I'm gonna formulate. Mm-hmm. But too much of that leads to nothing.
Yep.
So how do you think somebody best walks that line? Because too much action is how you end up in the fucking depths of hell without any thought, because you have no idea what direction you're going.
Yeah.
So how do you think people best walk that line between action and reflection, or action and thought?
I think that if you, that's a really good question. How do people walk that line? Well, I think that just in my experience, like I mentioned before, with the whole getting into personal development in the realms of fitness, developing stronger relationships with friends and dating, and then making money, it's always been identify a problem or something that makes me feel inadequate, unhappy, unfulfilled. Now, how do I solve that problem? So one way I could solve that problem is just guess what the solution is and test a bunch of shit and throw it at the wall endlessly. And you can probably find the answer on a long enough time horizon just by doing that, if you're like an intelligent person or you have enough time on your hands, I guess. Or you can go seek knowledge and try to find the answers from other people who have like achieved what you wanted. So just an example could be like how we started this conversation with diet and health and physique and stuff like that. If I want to become muscular and energetic and radiant and just be like a soul bra type figure, he's like a great example, a role model for a lot of people in that area. I can go to him, listen to what he has to say, research, go through some tweets, read some Instagram posts, watch some YouTube videos. And then once I'm like, okay, this starts to make sense, I start to build an idea of what I need to do to make this happen. Then you go test yourself and you test his ideas against your own experiences or whatever it might be. Some of the foods that he eats and some of the workouts he does are going to work incredibly for you, and you're going to feel great and you're going to start to get results immediately. And some you'll feel like shit and it won't feel right for you because you're not the same person as him. So that's where you start to make adjustments and figure it out on your own. And that's kind of just how I've gone about trying to develop every area of my life, is just find a mentor or role model that I really like and respect, who truly embodies what I want, like the end result. Not what other people tell me I want, but like when I look at this person, do I genuinely think I would love to live a day in this motherfucker's shoes and just like see what it feels like? And then you go do a bit of research, and then you take action on it and you test. Now, if you're someone who gets caught up in the mental fantasy and like the mental masturbation of watching someone else live your dream life, and then it becomes this entertainment factor thing where all I'm doing is binging soul bra content, I'm looking at it and thinking, wow, I wish I was that cool. I wish I was that jacked. And then I read every single Twitter post and blog post he's ever written. I spend an hour or two a day on my phone now where I could be working out and testing these ideas. I feel like that's the point where that's the tipping point where it starts to become detrimental and harmful for you, where it's like you just, someone who was a mentor of mine in the past in the realm of relationships told me for every 1 hour of content or information that you consume on a topic, you should spend 10 hours testing that and seeing how it works for you. And I actually think that's a pretty good ratio to go by. Go watch 1 hour of gym fitness content on YouTube, figure out how you should formulate your workouts and how you should be training, and then go test it during 10 training sessions or something, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Are you familiar with Miyamoto Musashi?
I'm familiar, yeah.
So
Not deeply, not like you.
Musashi by Yoji Yoshikawa is my second favorite book I've ever read. It's fictionalized, but it's very much so about as true as we can relay a story about Musashi can be in many ways.
Mm.
And one of the things that he did, he was the best swordsman arguably that's ever lived, but definitely the best swordsman that ever existed in Japan. I think he went like 60 something and 0 in duels, which if you think about swordsmanship, it's not like something that you have like a lot of losses, because guess what? Like when you lose, you don't really get many other opportunities. So the point I'm getting at is I have this written in my other journal. I remember reading this book and then like spending a couple pages on just my reflections on it. One of the things that I wrote was something along the lines of Musashi knew that study was important, but not as important as action, lest somebody becomes stuck in studying. Like, why do you study? You study so that you can learn and then act.
Yes.
And then you have a better informed basis of knowledge with which you can use to act in a better way or more congruently with who you want to become.
Yeah.
Somebody who only studies becomes 0% more like the person that they want to become.
Yeah, maybe only just intellectually or in mindset and belief, but then again, they still haven't stress tested these to see if they work for them. So you could like fantasize about this is who I am and this is what I'm about and this is my belief system, and then you're out in the real world and shit actually goes down and you're forced to embody that and live from that perspective and it doesn't work for you. Now you're fucked. Like, you know what I mean? You haven't built yourself. Yeah, there was something I was going to say on that Musashi point, but that's really good.
It'll come back. That's a great book.
I read I don't know when this was. This might have actually been when I went to juvenile hall for a while when I was like early teens, and I was not an avid reader back then, but my older brothers watched a lot of anime growing up, and I was always watching like Naruto and like Dragon Ball Z with them, and I found this huge stash of manga in the juvenile hall library, which is, for people who don't know, it's like Japanese comic books basically. And I started sifting through them, and I think I found one that was a book on Musashi's life called Vagabond, and it turns out it's like the top 5 like highest ranked manga of all time. Like, people love it. And it was incredible. Like, just great artwork first of all, but the whole thing was basically just a start to finish of his entire life. It goes through the duels in a really epic way too, but every book teaches you a new aspect of like his teachings. Yeah. Like, so yeah, that was my glimpse into that.
He's a G. Well, you know, it's interesting. I had a guy named Daniel Boyelli on, who I don't know if you're familiar with. He's got a podcast called History on Fire that's like top rated, and then another one called Drunken Taoist, and he's been on Rogan like 10 times. He's an absolutely fascinating dude. He's a historian, and he did a podcast series on Musashi. And what he learned was he found the same thing with Marcus Aurelius, which I found fascinating as well, because we don't typically hear many bad things about Marcus Aurelius, at least not in the West now. He found that they were so far on that side of the spectrum of like discipline, order, duty, all these things, that they actually had like maybe not unenjoyable lives or like not unfulfilling lives, but their lives in the end really like, what did they equate to? Because they had like no social circle. They had no, like, I don't think Musashi had any children. I know Marcus Aurelius had a child, Commodus maybe more, but long story short, there's this balance that needs to be struck between everything really. And it's interesting to hear somebody like Musashi, who was so studious on, like, he was so far on like that spectrum, on that side of the spectrum in terms of studying. He was always trying to learn about swordsmanship, but he knew that the best way to learn was to do. Like, you have to act to learn. And like your comment about like intellectually, you could become more like who you are, who you want to become, or who you're supposed to be. But I would argue that's like not, that's not like, it's not that it's not real, but it's like, what does that equate to in real life? Yeah. Like not much. And you brought up, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like just the swordsmanship, the martial arts thing. You can see someone do a movement and you can read about how a movement's done, but until you practice and get the muscle memory, you haven't internalized it. And I feel like the same thing is with a lot of things. Like, once you get hit with a stressful situation with social skills, you don't know how to actually be the guy who's like, oh, I'm going to lead through a tough time or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Or until like something serious actually happens in your business and you have a conflict going on, you don't know how to like, you're not going to, it's not internalized. You're not going to just like snap, make the right decision unless you've tested it a bunch of times.
Yeah. Jocko Willink, another guy that I have listened to a ton, probably more so than any other podcaster. He talks about if you want somebody, if you're a leader and you like, so say you lead like 5 teams, he was a SEAL leader. So he had multiple platoon chiefs under him. And he's like, if you want somebody to lead, what do you have to do? This is what people ask him all the time. Like, hey, I'm trying to develop this leader. I'm trying to become this type of leader. This guy that I like see a lot of promise in my organization. I want him to lead. Like, what do I do? What do I tell him? What resources? And he would just say, let them lead. Like, let them fuck up. Like, literally put them in a situation and let them figure it out. And that's so true in so many ways of life. But you've mentioned reading several times, which it's very evident. I mean, from the dinner and obviously now that you're well read. Do you have any like holy grail of books, like any Mount Rushmore of books that you like?
Yeah, I'm not like super well read, but I do a lot of like measure twice, cut once when it comes to picking a book to read. So I love to do like research into people's top book list. If there's someone that I follow closely, I want to figure out what they've been reading too and just like help narrow it down that way. Tim Ferriss's books are awesome. I liked 4 Hour Workweek. That's had a big impact on me from like a productivity and business standpoint. I think Way of the Superior Man is probably my most gifted book. I've probably bought and sent that to friends like 12 or 15 times just because it's like a must read for every guy. The Untethered Soul is like my holy grail for presence and spirituality. I never really resonated that much with Eckhart Tolle, whose name kept coming up when I was interested in learning more about like how I can be a more grounded person. But Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul is a great book. So those books I've given away a ton. And So Good They Can't Ignore You is a great,
I've never heard of that
book. It's by Cal Newport, the guy who wrote Deep Work.
Okay, and Digital Minimalism as well.
He's awesome. So Good They Can't Ignore You I read 4 years ago, and it completely changed my outlook on passion when applied to like career and work and how you make money. So I was in a place where I just had no clue what I wanted to do. And I was like, I don't think any of the things that I'm passionate about are going to directly generate an income for me right now. I'm not competent enough in them to like get paid. So this idea of purpose and passion was stressing me out. And you'll notice like I talk about these two things a lot, and I've read a lot of David Data's work, which is a lot about purpose. Because I was just completely like demystified. Like I was just like all over the place, had no idea what my purpose or my passions were really. And also like growing up in like this whole internet business space, like I was big into like watching YouTube videos about entrepreneurship and online business. And then like I love Twitter as well. And a lot of those people talk about that stuff. But I started to be like what do I choose? Like, I don't want to be the shiny object syndrome guy who just tries a bunch of different things. I also don't want to do something that I'm not passionate about just because it makes a lot of money. And then I read this book, and I'm going to butcher this a bit, but the general idea is that passion in like work and career is reverse engineerable as long as you're able to hold it up to a certain checklist when picking what you want to do. And that checklist was something like, does this offer you autonomy? So do you feel like you have freedom? Can you work where you want, when you want, to a certain degree? Like, do you have a level of autonomy in what you do? Making your own hours. Another one was, is it scalable? I believe, like, do you hit a cap of how much money you can make and how much impact you can have in your workplace, at which point putting in more effort doesn't yield more results? So then you're not whatever the word is, like you're not encouraged to grow past that point. And then I think the third one was like, do you love who you work with? Whether that be like colleagues or your clients. Do you pull your hair out at work every day dealing with the people in your workspace? Do you love the people that you're serving and working for? And I was like, damn, this is like really eye-opening. And then he goes through a bunch of different people who are like hyper successful in their careers in different ways, and then shows how they've checked all these boxes. One person was just like a world traveling copywriter. Another person was a successful musician. And in that book, he also talks about developing skills that are incredibly valuable and rare being a big part of like having a successful career, which is great. But that's just like work hard basically and be really good at what you do and have something that's unique. But the things that hit me were like, damn, like I need to find something where I feel like I have freedom and autonomy, where I feel like the harder I work, the more money I'll make and the more impact I will have on people, and where the people who I'm working with, I love working with them. And that framework led me into the type of real estate that I do today, which is just checks all those boxes for me. And it was super random too. If you had told me I'd be doing this, I'd be like, that sounds dumb. Like that sounds fucking boring or lame or something. But like, there's nothing boring and lame to me about making the amount of money that I'm making, having complete freedom, and having all the people that I work for and with be people that I would be friends with in real life.
Yeah.
So
what exactly is it? It's a apartment.
Yeah, well, they call it apartment locating in major cities in the U.S. where there's a high enough population of people living in apartments. If you have a real estate license, you can make a commission for connecting a person to that place, like that apartment complex. So most people think real estate is just residential, selling houses, or like commercial spaces or big land deals. This is like the smallest sales cycle version of that. So I'll work with like 10 to 30 people a month, helping them find places to live here in Austin and in surrounding areas, just making them feel like shortening the learning curve of learning the city and then getting to know what they need and want and can afford, and then helping them find that for them. And then I get paid on the back end for doing that. So it's not changing the world by any means. And that's why I'm so into Reveal, and I'm so passionate about what me and Matt are doing there, because that's the long-term play for me. But in what I'm doing now, I have complete freedom, and it's like amazing. I'm so grateful. I like pray every night and thank God that I have something that I'm doing that I'm good at, that I see potential making a lot of money doing if I want to continue doing it. And that just makes me feel like good, basically. Yeah. Like, you know, I'm just, every time I interact with people at the end of the interaction and the end of the sales process and helping them, they're always incredibly thankful, sending me little like gifts or like referring me to their friends and family. And that's usually a good sign.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. It's much like my brother spent time as a real estate agent on the residential side. He's actually in commercial real estate now, on the office side. But similar to you, it's almost like an office location, like a tenant rep, basically. You help a business find the space that fits their needs, and it's different than like big land deals and stuff like that. So how did you? Because I actually had never heard of that before the dinner. How did you like come about that?
I had never heard of it before a year ago when I started doing it, but I had a couple friends, Emily, Brooklyn here. Brooklyn runs Sphere and Secret Disco, if you're familiar with those. Her and her boyfriend Tanner are incredible. They're like really big people in like the social space here in Austin. But I met her through my previous business. I used to work in merchandising, and we just stayed close over the past couple of years. She's just a really genuine, good person. And I was always curious, like I knew you worked in real estate, but what do you do? Like, and how much money are you making right now? We just started talking about like money and career when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Because I was asking like everybody that I was friends with at the time. She was like, yeah, I do this and that, and I made this much money last month. And I was like, what the fuck did you just say? Like, that's like there's legitimately people that aren't making that in a year, and you're making that every month during the summertime for real estate. And she's like, yeah, like you'd probably be really good at it too. Like, I know that you're a really social person and you have a good concept of social media, which is how I market and meet people. So she's really the one who pushed me to do it. And then our other colleague and friend, Emily, was also just from day one, like, I'll teach you everything that I know, and I'm always down to help you. She felt like I had helped her in the past get like a bunch of modeling jobs and gigs and stuff. So they were like just more than happy to help me out. So that's how I found out about it. And yeah, I mean, if I hadn't have read that book beforehand, I would have completely overlooked it and be like, okay, this is just a job for like whatever, like they're both like gorgeous, like models. So I was like, this is probably like, I wouldn't look at them and say like, that's who I'm trying to be. But then when I applied, like, what type of lifestyle do I want to have? Theirs was just like lots of freedom, and they're making a ridiculous amount of money too for like an entry level job, like no college degree or anything like that. So
very cool. That's incredibly interesting. Did you go to college?
I did not. I went to, like I told you, my older brother is becoming a firefighter, or was at the time. I followed in his footsteps and did all the classes, prereqs and stuff for fire science, and then got my EMT. But I didn't end up pursuing it just because I was like not as passionate about it as I thought after going on ride-alongs and getting fucking piss and blood and vomit on me and stuff in San
wow.
Francisco. But that was my only, like, I hated school, dude.
Yeah.
Like, hated it. Yeah. Always in trouble. So
I'm fascinated because actually I spoke with the guy yesterday who dropped out of college after 2 months, and now he's made a significant amount of money as a 24-year-old, started his own business. And I went to college, obviously. Pretty much all my friends from home went to college. All my friends from college obviously went to college. And I think sometimes if I didn't have sports, or if I could go back maybe, or if I had to do it again, would I go to college? And without sports, I don't know if I would really, because I think that sort of tie back what we're talking about. Like it's a lot of like, not impractical, but it's a lot of theorizing as opposed to just being in the real world and learning through doing and learning through acting. So I find that interesting because even Matt went to a junior college. He got an associate's degree, but obviously killing it. It's just interesting to me to see people.
Yeah, unrelated to whatever he was doing, I'm sure.
Yeah, probably.
Usually completely unrelated. And yeah, theorizing on things you don't even give a shit about. That was the hard part for me, is like I could go home and study stuff about the human body and fitness and nutrition and get like this comprehensive knowledge of how the body works because I was passionate about it. Same thing when it comes to relationships and dating. Like as a young guy, I was just like fascinated by social dynamics and how men and women interact with each other. And I could research that for hours. But the second you put like algebra or like something that just was completely detached from what I wanted in my face, I was just like, yeah, I'm checked out immediately.
Did you ever like get diagnosed with ADHD or anything like that?
Yeah, I did. And they tried to put me on drugs when I was young, and it did not work good for me. So I was just like, all right, man, I just have ADHD. I'll deal with it.
Yeah, dude, that's how I feel, honestly. And I relate to the school part. I was always like intelligent. And then like late in middle school, early high school, I just like my grades went significantly down. I was getting in trouble with my teachers because I was just like literally just talking all the time. Like it just wouldn't pay attention. And I took an ADHD medication for 7 years.
Damn.
Yeah. And well, that's like one of the dude.
What was it? It was like
it was Vyvanse, and then it's Zennis after that. But the thing,
Zennis.
Yeah, dude.
The Zennies.
Yeah, dude. Bro, straight up, maybe there's some correlation there. But it was one of those things. Like I look back, and this is something I reflect on a good bit because I think it's one of those things. Not scares me, but I'm like, fuck, dude. I hope I didn't. I guess I just gotta have faith that it didn't. And I do have faith that it will work out. But like 7 years on fucking amphetamines, man, there's got to be some sort of neurotoxicity that's going on. But I always bring this up because I think it's so incredibly important as it relates to the system that most people are indoctrinated into in America specifically, and why it's part of the motivation that I have to build a different life for myself and my future family. I got diagnosed with ADHD as a 13-year-old boy, because I wasn't focusing in school. Okay, well, let's break that down. What is school? Basically a fucking basement for 7 hours a day with shitty airflow, copious amounts of blue light.
Yeah, fluorescent, fucked up lights.
Seed oil lunches, fat teachers talking about shit I literally could give less than like I literally didn't care at all. And then I go to the psychiatrist or whatever, and he's like, "Yeah, you have ADHD," and so I have no idea, and I don't like judge my parents for it either. Like they didn't know either. Like they're just doing the best they could for their kids at that time. But I just think about like how fucked that system is.
Totally.
Like you expect me to sit there in a damn classroom that's literally got zero natural light, listening to a fat lady talk about shit I have zero cares about, and then I don't do that, and then you're like, "Oh, we need to give this guy an amphetamine."
Yeah,
so
that'll help. An amphetamine of all things. Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same way, dude. I just like am like, okay, yeah, you take a young boy like me who's healthy, has his passions outside of school that he would rather be doing, super energetic, super social, like class clown through and through the entire way. Like I was always a really popular kid. In school, like the whole time in school, and was friends with most of the kids, like was just like a chameleon kid that could be friends with like the athletic kids, the dorky weird kids, the like kind of goth artsy kids. Like I was just in every friend group enjoying it. But then you put me in a seat and you like I had some incredible teachers. I had this teacher, Maria, through a lot of my elementary and middle school, who's just the like Mother Teresa. Like she's a
awesome.
fucking angel, and I love her to this day. But then I had some teachers that were just losers, like just objective losers that were new at this, not very good at teaching, dorks in their own right, and didn't have great like ability to just handle children. I feel like they're just untrained at it. And to be like, oh, it's my fault because I'm bored as fuck and I'm literally like vibrating and like being annoying as shit because I'm like under exercised and I have to get out of here and go skateboard or do something or play basketball. It's just like, yeah, it's literally a dumb way to look at it. Like it doesn't logically make sense. And I agree. And then they tried to put me on amphetamines. I probably just was like, oh yeah, the reason why I'm being annoying as shit and getting in trouble is because I have ADHD. Yeah, I have ADHD. Like just don't send me home again. Don't get me expelled or something. Like whatever you say. Like I don't know what the fuck ADHD is, but if you want to diagnose me with some shit so I could stay here and get special treatment, I'm down. And then they put me on some drug, and for 2 days I was just fucking manic. Like I was like fighting my best friends because like I was like a crackhead. I like went immediately down like a meth addict fucking vibe rabbit hole, and I couldn't eat. I couldn't eat because it fucked up my appetite, and then I was irritable and cranky and felt terrible because I wasn't eating and I was on amphetamines. And I literally remember like fighting my best friend one day for no good reason and being like, what is wrong with me? Like I'm behaving like a psychopath. And then I was like, it's probably the drugs. So I was like, fuck that. I'm just going to start smoking weed habitually, which has its own negative effects. But
like the exact opposite.
Yeah, my mom was like, okay, just drop it. We're not going to do the drugs anymore.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
You went like straight to the exact opposite.
Totally.
I also think about the process. I don't know if other people that get diagnosed go through the same process, but I remember mine. It was like 3 hours in the morning, then lunch, and 3 hours in the afternoon at some psychiatrist's office that was actually in the basement of this like office.
Sick.
Yeah, like fucking cool, man. Zero natural light again. There's actually a theme with that. And for 6 or 7 hours, they're like playing, it's like a noise. It's like it's 20 minutes of beep, beep. And every time it's the lower pitch noise, you have to click this button. And objectively, like looking back at it, I'm like, who does that in passes? Whatever, like who does that and like doesn't.
Wait, what were they testing you for?
My attention. Or like my focus.
That's how they're going to test your attention?
That's what I'm saying. Like, what the fuck?
Beeps in the basement?
Yeah, literally. Pretty wild, right? But
yeah, it's wild. It's just that, I mean, you and I are both big into the whole like conspiracy space, like all alternative kind of thinking, and then like looking at all of these structures at least in our country and then worldwide when it comes to like just health and education. There's all these correlations of just being like, dude, these people just don't know what the fuck they're doing, or they're doing the bare minimum, or they get an idea and they don't test it very well and they just pass it along because it's just a lack of care, like a genuine lack of care and interest in people's well-being, I think. And who knows what the ulterior motive is, if it's just laziness or if it's evil or if it's trying to just make money and not really worry about the outcome as long as it's passable to people and you can go under the parents' noses. Yeah, there's just themes of that throughout. So just questioning everything. But yeah, it's funny to hear that you're like the same kind of kid.
Yeah,
up.
I mean, looking back, it's one of those things I'm like, holy shit. Like I just, it's illogical. Like it literally just doesn't make sense to me. But there's a question it's kind of a, not redaction, but like a little bit of it's taken from Tim Ferriss. You know, his like question where he's like, if you had a billboard that everybody would see, what would it say? I'm curious, if you could write a tweet that everybody in the world would read, what would you write?
Oh, dude, that's hard. Tweet that everybody would read. Damn, I feel like I've never been much of a good guy when it comes to being concise. But I don't know. I've been really pondering these topics of masculinity lately, and I cater to this like group of men here with Reveal and Austin, and I've been very focused on helping my little brother develop, and then it helps me learn through the whole process too. So I'd probably target all of the guys in the world with a tweet, and just have that tweet be like something a very concise, simple breakdown of this is what masculinity is. And if you are not embodying this and your goal is to be a masculine man, and, you know, exist in the world in a way that feels good, then you should measure yourself up against these metrics. And like the things that I've been trying to internalize and test for myself lately come from this book called The Masculine in Relationships. Forget the author's name, but my buddy TJ recommended me this book, and it's sort of like an actionable blueprint version of The Way of the Superior Man. It talks about how you can really apply these ideas that are a little bit like amorphous and like woo-woo in that book to like tangible situations. And the idea is masculinity, when in relationships, when applied to the polarity between masculine and feminine and how you interface with the world, is boiled down to three things. The ability to lead and make decisions, the ability to respond rather than react, and the ability to create safety. And I would probably just put those three. I would put masculinity at the top and those 3 bullet points on in the tweet, and just boom, blast it out to guys and just get them thinking like, that's very pondering. I posted that on my Instagram the other day, and I got like a bajillion likes and like tons of responses.
Yeah.
Because I think that people really, and guys especially, really like when you just distill something down into the simplicity thing. I'm a big Dan Coe fan as well. He's one of those guys that I look at and I'm like, he's so good at just distilling ideas into like one sharp sentence.
Oh yeah. He's a master at that.
Yeah.
That's a good answer. I remember seeing that post actually. I think it's also interesting that you choose to cater to men instead of like some global thing, because obviously like that's who you cater to and that's what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting response. And I think those 3 points, I agree with them all. The other question, I think we're pushing like hour 45 or something, but,
nice.
The other question that I like, and this is such an interesting, I think it's insightful for the guest, like people that get asked this question. Tyro experience, you kind of heard me say it earlier. Tyro means novice or beginner and stems from the Latin word meaning young soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, obviously, we're not young soldiers in the traditional sense of going into fight in a war per se. But I believe a Tyro to be somebody who's in an arena. We're all in an arena, but somebody that's in an arena and is picking up their sword, running towards the middle and fighting, as opposed to trying to jump out, trying to cower, trying to hide. My question to you is, what arena are you running towards the middle of?
That's such an awesome question. I love that. Through like my whole adulthood, I've been trying to figure out where I have a natural edge and where my strength lies, because every man wants to feel strong and capable. Every man wants to feel like a leader in an important part of their community and someone that's admired. And like, like I told you, I've tried things like contact sports. I've gotten super into fitness and athletics, and I never found myself being like, this is my natural edge. I'm naturally just going to be a cage fighter or something. And then, with business and such, I'm not the type of person who gets like extreme pleasure from 18-hour grind sessions, just making like $1 million in a month. Like, sort of listen to your intuition and like what is both respected and admired by the people around you, but also you would do if no one saw. And you're just like, this is my thing. This is where I resonate. And it wasn't until I started hosting things for like building these events for my community and bringing people together, and also just making one-on-one connections, that I started to feel like I might have a natural edge. And I enjoyed it. And it started as just, I see potential in a relationship forming if these two people meet. And I know they won't meet otherwise, so let me make a connection for them. And then, holy shit, they become best friends. I see potential in these two other people meet and they got together and then they're married 3 months later. Like, this is real things that have happened. And they lived on other sides of the planet, and I connected them digitally, and then just boom. And I'm like, maybe I'm a pretty good judge of people, of cohesion between people, and I can see people for their potential, and I'm like a visionary in that sense. And that can be something that's beneficial for other people, and it brings me intense pleasure and joy, because it's like, it's contributing to their lives as well. So I was like, let's take this to a community scale and start hosting these events. I found another guy who had the same love for it and a similar ability where we both play to each other's strengths in Matt. And I was like, this is perfectly congruent with what we're doing here. Is if we're a team, it makes even more sense. It's this brotherhood. It's born from a feeling of brotherhood and connection between the two of us. And then the arena, like I mentioned at the beginning, is the modern day is so separated, and people feel like there's just so much animosity and like just combat happening in every arena, and this less support and less natural mentorship in our education system kind of thing. Like people aren't shown that like you found something in baseball probably with your team that you wouldn't have found elsewhere, and that changed you as a person. And like, you know, in ancient Greek and Roman days or whatever, it was very, very, that's how you learned, is from like mentorship, relationships kind of thing. And we don't have that as like a common thing anymore either. It's just you go into this education system, and then you're just spit out into the real world, and you feel alone through the whole process most of the time. And that's the evil that I want to combat, is this feeling of separation and loneliness. And we're also being fed all these weird ideas about it too. And it's strangely insidious, because it's things like going on social media like Instagram or TikTok, and it's like these popular things of like this Sigma idea, which like wasn't a thing a couple years ago. It started as alpha, and it's like, oh shit, like this term alpha becomes a meme. And now it's like Sigma, which the idea of Sigma is like you are by yourself wearing the gray sweatsuit in the damp fucking basement, grinding, doing the fucking Sam Sulek workouts and trying to be jacked, and just being like this, just like
lone wolf,
isolated beast. And it's like, I don't know anyone that does that. Well, I mean, obviously they'd be in a basement somewhere rather than somewhere I'd be able to meet and find them, but I don't know anyone that actually has done that with success. And if you look at the real people at the top levels of success, they're all people that have strong community and brotherhood. It's not it's not lone wolf type people, you know? And so all of that has combined, and I'm just trying to utilize my natural affinity for dealing with people and seeing the best in people and bringing people together and creating experiences that are meaningful and impactful and facilitate connection just at the highest level that I possibly can. Like triple, quadruple down on it with Matt and form a community of guys. And then eventually, if that community becomes something as important as I think it will be to each of the guys who are part of it, and then spiderwebs out to their friends and family and communities as well in a positive way, then I could see myself building something like that in major cities across the world, and then having it be this intertwined network. But yeah, if there's one battle that I want to fight, it's people thinking that doing shit alone is the right way to go about things. And then just being like, not having this awareness that, like that old adage of you want to go far, go together, you want to go fast, go alone, or something like that.
Yeah.
That's complete bullshit to me, dude. I've gone way faster and way farther with a group of guys that are in alignment with what I am passionate about and are there to support me and push me, and then also share resources, than I ever would have done alone.
Yeah.
Like that adage is complete bullshit.
I think that's a valiant fight, man. It's definitely something that I relate to. I think it's important for the reasons that you just mentioned, and also just what we've hit on. Like the world is kind of going that way towards like isolation, towards this like we can do it alone, which is totally bullshit. So, I mean, firstly, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for doing what you're doing with Reveal and Matt, and living the way that you're living. And also thank you for coming on. Thank you for your time and your energy.
This is fun.
Yeah, man. This is a good time.
It's not often that the second time you get to kick it with someone cool is on a podcast, but yeah.
It is what it is.
Love it.
I appreciate you, brother. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
And with that, I hope y'all enjoyed the conversation with Leo. That was a fascinating conversation. Very insightful guy, very well read, articulate. I think he brought up some good points, especially as it relates to sibling dynamics and how those manifest themselves in the real world and throughout our lives. Something that I relate to, and I think many of you will be able to as well. Follow Leo at Leo_STAGI on Instagram. That's Leo_STAGI on Instagram. good follow, good dude. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Until next time, stand firm in the arena.